Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Keeping score on a regular basis, we always talk about the big issues of the week in a trillion-dollar business. And Dan Colarusso, the executive worldwide digital editor of Reuters, I know I got the title wrong. Doesn't matter. You run the place. How are you?
There are a lot of words in there. It's hard. I get it wrong often myself. I'm doing great, enjoying the baseball postseason, enjoying the shambles of a football season we've seen so far. So it's been a good couple of weeks.
Well, shambles is in the eye of the beholder. But let's talk Cubs, and more Cubs. According to broadcast and cable, ad sales up about 30% across the board, $550,000 for a spot. And a lot of it, they say, is anticipation of the National League Championship Series, which means Cubs. Even the advertising agencies are saying more interest from non-traditional players, retailers, other brands, and people that are not baseball fans are following the story of the Cubs not winning a World Series in like 700 years, right?
It is folklore. And I just want to say, last week, when we talked about how much Theo Epstein should be paid, I said that the Major League Baseball should chip in because of the revenue the winning Cubs team brings into the league. And this is, I didn't realize how right I was or how soon I'd be proven right. But this is fantastic. I mean, it's folklore. It's a great story. It's a fairy tale. All the Cubs fans I know are, chewing their fingernails down to the nubs. It's just great. It's great for baseball. It's fun to watch. It gives baseball a really nice story into the postseason when otherwise we'd be sitting around trying to figure out who the third starter on the Cleveland Indians were.
Well, that's a good point, especially as the season and the series gets deep into two sweeps by two American League teams who shouldn't have done it, and everybody is now worried about the American League side of it. But it doesn't really matter, by the way, if the Cubs keep rolling. And I think probably what we should do is to take up a collection for Theo Epstein and take the difference in ad revenue and rates over this series of Cubs appearances and then add it on a percentage basis to the value of Theo Epstein's long-term contract. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. He's in Mike Trout territory right now as an executive, right?
Yeah, Mike Trout territory or Bob Gibson with the Cardinals. But by the way, on the Cubs side, there is a new park at Wrigley Field, according to Crane Chicago Business, which is a long-term deal with Hickory Street Capital, and the naming rights for a 50,000 square foot plaza, a 6-story office tower next to Wrigley Field, headquarters, restaurants, retail. And by the way, get this, A, they're doing it on the heels of Cubs momentum, and B, which is even more important, because it's not part of the stadium itself and the naming deal, they don't share this as part of baseball's general fund. So the players can see it across the street, but they don't get any revenue from it as a revenue share because it's a development outside the stadium. What do you think of that?
I think that smells like a lawsuit. I mean, again, you're the guy who went to law school. But if I were Major League Baseball, I'd be writing a letter, a very sternly worded letter to the developers.
The developers and the Cubs are getting the dollars. That's not the problem. The ownership is getting it. It's just a question of the players don't get their share. But you know what? If they don't like it, they can take their $4 million per person annual salary and hire some lawyers to figure that out. But the other piece of baseball, which is interesting, is you think of London as maybe NFL, certainly Premier League, coming off the Olympics, but Major League Baseball is making specific plans, and they're announcing them, to try to get a regular season game or games in London for 2018. They ran out of time in 2017, but they're thinking of the Yankees and the Red Sox, which is a great rivalry here. I'm not sure it's a great rivalry at Olympic Stadium, but Commissioner Manfred says, we're going to try it. We're going to see how many baseball fans we have. I think a lot of it has to do with Cubs and exciting pro season, but a lot of it has to do with European baseball and the Olympics. What do you think?
Could I put my pessimism on the record? I think if you're Major League Baseball, it doesn't work for that audience. I mean, there's a good chance they can grow into it. But if I were Major League Baseball, I'd be looking a lot more to Asia. I'd be looking a lot more to Latin America. I think you're trying to sell a sport. I mean, it's one thing to sell the NBA. It's one thing to sell football. Baseball is an acquired taste. Like, you love it for the game. You love it for the environment. but it is really more like a Premier League thing where there's so much folklore and environment that makes it interesting that I don't know that you transplant that so well. I don't know that it carries across that particular ocean. I think it carries really well in Asia, and I think it carries really well in Latin America. I don't know what the payoff is. I think they're going there because there's money there and there's some big corporate sponsors there, but I don't know that it becomes the thing that the NFL at Wembley is, right?
Well, yes, and not only does Colarusso say it, but Manfred, who's the commissioner, who has a little more stroke on this one, says the same thing, where he's saying it's not skeptical, but it's an open issue, and it's something they'll continue to discuss with the Players Association, and he thinks, this is his words directly, that they could make money with the undertaking. So what's the key to approval with the players? That they split a pie they don't have already. But if I'm going to Colombia or Venezuela or places that are Latin American and, of course, Dominican, etc., I focus on that, and maybe, obviously, China and Japan before I go to London. The issue is, can you do both? And I guess that's what they're looking at.
Right. I mean, look, you have to be there. The market's big, I guess, but I just feel like there's such a natural connection to those other countries that makes it a bigger hit.
Yeah, well, and by the way, every English person that I've talked to about baseball says it's long and boring, and you know what the answer to that is?
Cricket.
That's all you need to say, right? That's all you need to say.
Those games take weeks and months, don't they?
Yeah. Let's talk about something we talked about last week, but it's not going to go away, as we talked before. NFL underwhelming viewership numbers so far, not due to a decrease in football interest, says an internal memo. They say the whole Kaepernick deal, and by the way, late flash, he's going to start this week, but they're playing an away game in Buffalo. They decided not to start him at home, and so he's going to take over for Blaine Gabbert, a little bit of football news. But the bottom line is everybody in the NFL is saying it's not sportsmanship, it's not the lack of Brady, it's not the Kaepernick stuff, but it's Trump, and Hillary. What do you think?
I guess we'll find out this week, right? Because the next debate is on a Wednesday night. And last I checked, the one night of the week that the NFL has kept sacred is Wednesday night. There's no game on Wednesday night. It'll be interesting to see. Look, last week I discounted on this show. I discounted the Kaepernick effect. I didn't think it was a big deal. I've read stories today by guys who are friends of mine who are sports writers talking about it in a serious way, and I didn't realize the kind of underground swell that had come up around it. And it's interesting. I don't think you can start Kaepernick at home. You can start him on the road. I think that controversy is going to follow him. But I still argue that the NFL this year doesn't have a great defending champion for a storyline. Brady wasn't around for 4 weeks. The New York teams are terrible. Chicago's teams are terrible. I don't see the grab in why I have to watch the NFL beyond highlights at this point. And I think a lot of football fans are in the same spot right now. So I think that it might be Trump. I think it's a convenient excuse, but I think there's a lack of storyline that is keeping people home. And maybe it is the Kaepernick effect. I hate Super Bowl parties. I'm a big football fan. I hate Super Bowl parties because people interrupt the football. It takes over. So is that how the average NFL fan is feeling about the protests?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the issue. I don't know, but it is, again, it's a league without a story right now, and they better find one soon.
Well, and the story may be some of the emerging teams like Atlanta's resurgence and a couple of other, like the Eagles playing well. But, the bottom line of all of this is that we'll see what happens Thanksgiving and beyond, and the races happen and when baseball's over. I think the first part of this show are Cubs and the excitement of baseball may be cutting into some of the football interest as well. So we'll see. But let's shift to another sport that's starting in 2 weeks in earnest. ExxonMobil signs a multi-year sponsorship deal with the NBA, which includes rights in China. Activision begins at next week's preseason game in Shanghai and Beijing, and ExxonMobil breaks out NBA-themed creative in China, featuring the Lakers' new forward, who is now a promotional darling. ExxonMobil expected to cut media deals with a number of the teams, but NBA hasn't had a motor oil sponsor for more than 15 years. And NBA China has cut this deal.
Not even the Nets? Wait. The Nets didn't have a motor oil halftime shot of the
Well, the
day
Nets
or
may have
something?
done it for the wheelchairs as they greased them for the guys who were over 45 and 50 years old that they signed to no effect. Yeah, but listen, the bottom line is you can create a category that didn't exist and bring in big money. How about the NBA 3 years ago creating an official watch and timing category for their 24-second clocks, and they were dealing with Timex and Movado and all those guys. So it's creative, but the bigger issue is NBA in China. And look, with all the people in China, all you need is a small
Yeah.
handful to be NBA fans, and you're golden. But the NBA is doing better than that, right?
Yeah, I would say, I would say it's a cheap way for Exxon to get in on the NBA. You go to you take the deal in one of the more emerging markets, and you get a lot of upside. Where just like TV rights and broadcast rights here in the States, in the key markets, there's not a lot of value left. All the value is hopefully derivative. There's not a lot of core value left at the price level. So maybe Exxon comes in and is able to hit the Chinese market, hit the Asian markets broadly, and maybe, who knows, maybe they'll sponsor something from Stephon Marbury. Is he still playing there?
Yeah. Well, listen, you are a closet, not even a closet. You're way out of that one for the Knicks. You've been a Knicks fan for a long time, and Kristaps Porzingis, he signs a multi-year footwear and apparel deal with Adidas, most lucrative shoe deal signed by a European player to date. We're talking about $3 to $6 million annually from Adidas, and Porzingis signed a 4-year deal with Nike in 2012 that paid him, guess what, $25,000 a year. Now he's graduated to $3 to $6 million a year. It's the same ballpark contract with those of Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Blake Griffin, all of whom are kind of big-time guys on their own teams. So Porzingis has struck gold with Adidas. Let's just see if the Knicks strike gold with Porzingis, huh?
So you're telling me Dirk Nowitzki never had a deal that big?
Not with Adidas, and it's kind of interesting when you think about it, and it may be, who knows why. And it's a very good point. German.
Well, I was just thinking great European players who made the leap and had a dynamic game. You look at Porzingis, and I think you and I were corresponding before the show, and Porzingis is the one reason left to give money to the Dolans. He makes the team interesting.
That's true. But look at this. Porzingis is dynamic. He's charismatic. And do we think that Dirk just was good and stable and conservative and not the kind of guy that you would sell tickets? Although he's been a Maverick for years.
Who would ever know? He played in Dallas, right? I mean, isn't
right.
that the Derek Jeter rule here in play? Like, a guy plays in New York, and it adds juice to him. There's an international audience built in. There's a lot of expat executives who have season tickets at the Garden. There is a more global culture around New York basketball, not because of its team per se. I mean, Porzingis, I think, is the first European that's really hit star status for the Knicks. I mean, they had Gallinari a few years ago, but he didn't really turn out to be much of anything, at least with New York. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting leverage, I think, for Adidas. And I mean, it's great that this kid seems to be making the most of his time and getting better as a player. He doesn't seem to have fallen into the New York ego trip just yet.
Just yet is the point. And it'll be interesting, by the way, for the NBA as they head into the final round of collective bargaining negotiations to extend the deal that started in 2011 by December 15 or say forget it, which they won't do. But we'll cover that over the next few weeks. But it is really good that you've got the players who are earning a lot more of their endorsement dollars, the NBA becoming more international. What does a greater pie mean? More money for players, more money for owners, and a less likelihood of actually a work stoppage because nobody wants to kill the goose that created the golden basketball, I guess you call it.
Right, and so much is built around these collective bargaining agreements and the TV deals now that guys will plot their contracts, right? You know this far better than I do. Guys will plot their contracts to expire, to be up, to be re-upped on these kind of years when these pots of money start to swell. Is that the case with this go-around with the CBA, or is this a smaller deal?
Very much so, and when you think of it, everybody talking about Kevin Durant, and we'll have him and his guys on in a couple of weeks, which will be good. But everybody talked about Kevin Durant as, selling himself to the devil and going to Golden State. And by the way, he signed a 1-year deal, and so everybody expects him to re-up. But everybody is targeting the free agency bonanza at the end of next year when the TV contracts are even higher. And so The NBA is looking for a whole lot of new revenue, including technical revenue and high tech stuff and equipment, and it's a major deal. We've got a guy who's exciting that we'll feed into in a minute, Tim Hayden. He's involved in the managing director of something called Stadia Ventures, but they're really a financial accelerator for sports technology companies of all kinds. And it's really kind of cool to talk about how the sports business has gotten way beyond just playing, but technical and medical and training and all of that stuff.
Well, if you look at just the revenue lines that you and I have talked about in the last 3 or 4 weeks since, we've been doing this part of the show, I mean, they go for everything from Formula One to Exxon Mobil oil to motor oil to these are not things we would have discussed even 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That to me is the difference. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit going into sports. And when you look at technology and you look at sabermetrics or fantasy, you look at the data crunching that's going to go that is going on in professional sports now, and you look at a startup that's able to maybe to crunch some data. You're looking at algorithms, possibly. You're looking at real technical things, and aside from pure hardware technology, you're looking at software and analytics that I think are well beyond where they were a few years ago. And these teams really need it because you are trying to extract maximum value from these revenue streams because you don't know how long they're going to be. You don't know when you're going to diversify. You don't know when you're the NFL and all of a sudden your TV ratings fall 11%.
Well, and here's the deal. Everybody out there who's listening to this podcast, if you have a good idea, but it's not capitalized, and if you have some idea of how to make some money in sports, you better listen to what's coming up. Tim Hayden is the guy that runs incubator/accelerator at St. Louis University that has anything to do with sports. It's the Center for Entrepreneurship. Tim Hayden. Keeping score, Rick Horrow. All aspects of the trillion-dollar sports business. Used to be $1 billion, maybe 50 years ago. Now we came up with numbers that say it's over $1 trillion, and our guest can kind of validate some of that. He's an academic as well as an entrepreneur. Tim Hayden, the managing director of Stadia Ventures, also involved in the academic program at St. Louis, and a lot of other entrepreneurial things, stadiums, facilities. Your bio is magnificent. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing good. Rick, I truly appreciate you having me on.
What is it like at St. Louis University now? Is it you have a lot more time on your hands now that the Rams left town?
Actually, we keep looking for new ways to fill the void. And so, unfortunately, since there were so few fans going to the games anyway, it's actually kind of an easy way to fill. But to be honest, though, we're still friends with everybody over in L.A. side of things. So it's a very amicable side of things.
All right, let's talk about you. First of all, give us kind of an elevator speech about Stadia Ventures and what the deal is.
Sure. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. My partner is a gentleman named Art Chu, and he used to run all innovation for Rawlings for about 10 years. And before that, he ran innovation for Titleist for 7 years. My background is over a period of the last 12 years, I've either started or helped to start 7 different sports businesses. So everything from mobile app platforms for sports fans, so pre-MLB at bat, if you will, all the way through helping to launch a couple of professional soccer teams and a professional soccer league. So when we came together, our whole pain was that we know a bunch of entrepreneurs that are lacking the ability to get to the leaders within these bigger sports industry organizations. And the main reason is there's just too much clutter out there. There's a lot of stuff out there of trying to break through the ranks. And so for the good entrepreneurs, it becomes very difficult. And then with my partner on the opposite side, he's saying, hey, I'm waiting to see the best of the next innovation, the next thing that can help us transform a company. But again, cutting through that clutter. And then between the two of us, we knew of a bunch of investors that they love to invest in technology and real estate, construction, manufacturing, but their passion is really sports. So our concept was, how do we bring all of that together? How do we bring the best of each of those 3 worlds? And in our mind, how do we create a sports innovation hub and allow it to run more efficiently? And it's not that we need to own everything, but at least we could really be pulling the players together in all these different areas to truly help accelerate what we're seeing on the field, what we're seeing in the retail on the shelves, what we're actually seeing in technology with training and with the amateur athletics. And so that was the ultimate objective for it.
Well, and it's worked very well, obviously, and this is a business show. So let's talk a little bit about the business plan. That's the concept, and you've so far passed Sports Business 101, but then how do you get it funded? What's the ROI look like? What's the return for investors? What's the business proposition?
So what we ended up creating first was an accelerator. And for those that are not familiar with accelerators, think of it along the lines of an immersive business development boot camp for the best entrepreneurs that we can find. So we do a international search. We end up narrowing the field using judges, and the judges are always senior leaders in sports business that are our friends. We joke we've been in this industry long enough. Fortunately, we haven't pissed off very many people, so we have a lot of friends kind of helping us along this journey. And so our goal is twice a year, we will pick the best 5 sports startups. They all are established startups, meaning that they already have a product or a service in market. They already have traction, and they already have revenue of anywhere from about $100,000 to $3 million a year in revenue. We will invest up to $100,000 into each of those 5 businesses, and then, as we say, we will drop them into an immersive business development boot camp. We'll surround them with mentors that can help truly move their needle on the biz dev side or organization side or other things. And then we will take them through a 12-week program. At the end of it is demo day, and they get up on stage in front of hundreds of investors and sports execs to kind of showcase their new or their unveiled new companies. And so each of those investments comes with an equity transaction. So therefore, we will own a piece of each of those companies. So it's in our vested interest to truly help them move the needle and help them move down their path.
What are the best 2 or 3 deals and return? I guess it's 2 questions. One is the best return on investment / business deals that you've made by taking equity in companies. And then I guess the next question, so you can separate them in your own mind, is what's been the most fun ones? Those are necessarily two separate questions, I'm sure.
Exactly. And here's what's so funny. I'll answer the second question first because it's almost like when a parent says, well, I love all my children the best.
Yeah.
But in our case, each of these companies coming through are phenomenal. I mean, they are handpicked for us to help accelerate them. So I think when we talk fun, I mean, we're just in a fun industry to start with, but each of these companies are just amazingly cool and obviously already running down the path of traction. So I'd almost end up saying it's hard for me to say which ones are the worst ones because they're all just awesome. On the front side of this thing, we have companies, so this is our 3rd cohort. So a cohort is education parlance, it would be a semester. So we are currently into our 3rd cohort, and with that is we only have about 14 companies in our portfolio right now. And so they range. I mean, in this current cohort, we have Nix Biosensor, which is, think about it as a Band-Aid that will go on your skin, and it will evaluate your sweat. So not only will it tell you that you need to be hydrated or you're overhydrated or whatever, it will also measure what is in your sweat and let you know what you're missing at that moment. So do you need electrolytes and Gatorade? Do you need, so whatever that thing looks like. So it is an entrepreneur out of Harvard. She invented it out at Harvard. She is currently moving towards production right now. And so she has so much traction running with the likes of, Under Armour, Gatorade, and Powerade all love her technology. So companies such as that, all the way down to, and she is out of Boston, all the way down to Leaf Tech out of New York, which had a successful Kickstarter campaign for a motorized skateboard, longboard. But the beauty is he has a patented system underneath the skateboard to allow you to turn sideways and edge as if you're on a snowboard. And it all happens on asphalt. And so a successful Kickstarter campaign, we truly wanted to jump in because we could see how we could help them. We have a group out of Charlotte, North Carolina that created the Uber for boating. So 1%ers all have access to captains for fishing and personal yachts and things. Well, their service called Easy Waves provides the service to get any person on a boat with a certified captain within 3 hours. So they don't need to own it anymore. They can just get on it, enjoy the day, get off, and move on with their lives. So it's fascinating to see all these, but I think the biggest one, normally within an accelerator, you have a 5-year window before you see an exit. And we saw our first exit in our first 7 months. So there's a group out of Toronto called Winning Identity. If you turn on the Golf Channel, most of the stuff you see on there in a digital format is done by this group out of Toronto. We introduced them to a potential client. It turns around that the client loved them so much, they acquired the company 7 months after entering our accelerator. So that one, I think, is probably our best success to date. And then we have a lot of different kind of discussions going on with other potential exits as well.
The whole idea of the tech industry, I guess if you were to say one thing more than anything. It's evolving, and where are the sweet spots for technological innovation, let's say over the next 5 years? It's an impossible question to answer, but stay at 30,000 feet.
Sure. No. And our goal is we are holistic sports. So, I mean, we'll be looking at product all the way through service, all the way through technology. I think what's on our radar is going to be e-gaming. Definitely, towards the very top. And with the opportunity and the market potential for just that one category and what we're seeing internationally is a very big deal. The second one would be gaming. And obviously, within the U.S., that becomes a little bit more a touchy subject, but internationally, it's off the charts. One of the companies that came through our program last cohort is Behind the Picks. They had developed an algorithm for the stock market, but it was too volatile, so they moved it over to sports, and they've actually been able to pick winners on a more accurate scale. They're actually showing it at 78% average success. So your money that you would have put in about 5 years ago into the S&P, they would have actually tripled the S&P return on investment. So there's amazing technology and amazing things going on within the gaming portion side. Wearables, always going to be. Just because, with our friends over at Under Armour and our friends over at Wilson and Dick's Sporting Goods and things like that, we see a lot of great things happening within that wearable space. And then the other one's going to be augmented reality and virtual reality. I mean, truly, what we're seeing right now is, and again, we're lucky that we get a chance to see a lot of great new technologies that have not hit the true market yet. But what we're seeing and how the teams are using, like the San Francisco 49ers and how they're using virtual reality, the stuff that we tested out is fantastic. I mean, from all the way down to where you are immersed onto the field in a virtual world, but it looks real, using gloves that are tactile, so you can see through your goggles that there is a football, and when I grab it, I actually feel the resistance of that football with my hand, to then defensive coordinators plugging in new defensive schemes so that, it's almost like you're playing Madden, but yet you're actually on the field going up against a defensive lineman. So there's a lot of fascinating things that are coming down the pipe right now.
This is incredibly intriguing from a business perspective as well, because you get ideas. I'm sure there is no shortage of ideas. How do you create a process yourself where within 30 seconds you can decide in your own way kind of whether something merits the next step or not?
Now, Rick, that's an awesome question. So the beauty about my ties with St. Louis University, so at this moment we have the number 10th ranked entrepreneurship program in the world for undergrad and the number 14th ranked program for masters. Been teaching since 1973. So there are ways that we run the programs within SLU that allow you to fast track things. But with that being said, Guy Kawasaki used to be the chief evangelist for Apple, and he always ended up coming back talking about 3 pillars. You have to have pain, you have to have a solution, and you have to have somebody willing to pay for that pain to go away. So if you're missing any of those 3 components, and in a lot of cases your sniff test can be performed just off of that one, that one little equation. If you're missing any of them, you would just have a great idea, and there's millions of ideas out there, but it may not be a great business opportunity. And so in our case, where we get lucky is with our accelerator, we get to see a lot of the best that are established businesses. But we will never, ever tell anybody no as far as getting in touch with us, even if you just have a pure idea. Our whole goal for this hub was we want everybody on our radar because there may be ways we can help you with your idea. But what the flip side is most people will never tell you that your baby is ugly, until you have skin in the game. You never tell anybody their baby's ugly. But in our case, we want to help them understand what the real dynamics are. So even though you think you have the next best thing, what is the industry really looking like? What is the actual path to success where so many people think, hey, I should go pro? Well, in reality, pro may be the worst angle that you could take for your product. Maybe it is minor league, college, and amateur because that's really where the money is and the business opportunities. So we try to disconnect the whole passion and your baby syndrome to what your true business is. But at the end of the day, we're Midwesterners, and we're not going to tell you it just sucks. We'll try helping you figure out how you can move it forwards.
Man, I love this concept, especially that there is no such thing as an ugly baby that you're going to turn away. That is an amazing idea for a sports entrepreneur. Final question: you have somebody that has an idea out there, and what's the one bit of advice you can give that person before he takes the next step?
So when we put this hub together, the whole concept was we're pulling in graybeards. We're pulling together the older, more mature, more wise folks with experience together with newbies. And so find as many old graybeards as you can. And just ask them. Conduct informational interviews. Don't try selling right off the bat. Just try sitting down and understanding the dynamics of what they have going on, because it actually may allow you to pivot your own ideas to be more in line with what they have going. So I think the first thing is just get as much advice as you can, but then at the end of the day, and we talk about this all the time with our students and with our cohort members, is trust your gut. I mean, you're going to be the expert in this field for a specific reason, but trust your gut, because you may be getting advice, unspin the spin, but be able to hold true to what the tenets are of your business or your product or whatever else. But at the end of the day, talk with as many people as you can. Don't hold it too close to the vest. Most ideas are already out there, so if you're thinking somebody's going to steal it, well, you need to be able to trust those folks first, and you need to be able to get it out there to get the best advice you can.
What great advice. As a kind of a graybeard myself, I'm buying what you're selling.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Bethel Habte. Assistance provided by Tanner Simpkins and Carlos Waddick. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.